75% on that position.
Hi everyone, welcome to another IG Takeover. I'm Christine Daal with Fashion and Jewelry, and today I am representing Tex World as their brand ambassador for their new virtual trade show event, which is happening July 21st to the 23rd. I am super excited to be here. Hopefully all of you have registered. Make sure that you click the link in the bio and register today. And I am going to interview a wonderful woman. And let's see if I can bring her on right now.
7,000 shares. 6 and S at 99.49. So it's 7,000 shares.
Hi, Manpreet.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Hopefully you can't hear too much of my husband in the background. We're sharing an office right now due to COVID.
It's all good. It's all good. My husband and I were also sharing a one-bedroom apartment as our office for a few weeks, and then we decided it's time to drive 14 hours down to California and take over my parents' house instead.
Okay. Oh, good. So you have more space at least to
yes,
spread out.
It is officially day 2 of having more space. So,
Awesome.
but I can feel with you. I understand.
Yes, totally. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I'm super excited to be interviewing Manpreet of the New York City Fair Trade Coalition. She is one of the Resource Row partners at Tex World. She's going to be at the Tex World virtual trade show event that's happening July 21st to 23rd. And we're going to learn all about fair trade, what it means to source fair trade, why that's important, and so on. So thanks so much for tuning in. So Manpreet, please talk about what does it actually mean to be a fair trade business? Because I think people throw this term around and don't really quite understand what the true meaning is.
Yeah, and actually before that, I'm going to take a moment to just introduce myself so people know what my tie is with fair trade. So my name is Manpreet Kalra. I am on the board of the New York City Fair Trade Coalition. We are a grassroots organization based in New York, and we have both members that are advocates of fair trade, but also business members. So businesses that are practicing fair trade principles in order to make sure that they're sourcing responsibly and being thoughtful about their supply chains. So that's what fair trade is. That's what my tie with fair trade, apart from a lot in the fair trade space, working on diversity and inclusion along with digital storytelling. So that's been, you know, my area. Fair trade in general, just so everyone knows what that term is, kind of thrown around everywhere. And so there's actually many people don't realize what it actually means. So fair trade is a commitment to making sure that you prioritize people and the planet over profits. And that's the easiest way to understand what it means to be a fair trade business or social enterprise.
And now, can you be a fair trade business if you do one without the other? Because I would think like the planet part is sustainability, right? Making sure everything you do is kind of sustainable. So a lot of people will say we're a sustainable business, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a fair trade business. Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so definitely it's worth noting that both you can't. So fair trade, traditionally speaking, started off as a commitment to make sure that you are paying the people who are creating products a fair wage. And that is how the fair trade movement started, because we've seen so much exploitation of garment workers and makers and artisans. And so that's where the fair trade movement really started. But over the years, the commitment has really shifted over to, and a lot of the certifying bodies and businesses or organizations that are overlooking fair trade principles really do push that it's not just about people, but it's also about making sure you're thinking about the planet as well. But in the most true form of the word, yes, fair trade is more about people, but we've shifted away and started to really focus on how, because it's true, people and planet go hand in hand. We see that as communities that most impacted impacted by global warming. So the planet is a critical part of fair trade as well.
And that definitely would make sense, because if you're trying to treat people fairly and pay them a good wage and all this other stuff, if they have, let's say, poor drinking water because your factory is polluting it, right? Then how good are you treating the people at the end of the day? So
Yeah,
totally
exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. And people, I think, you know, we often think of, and this was one of those things when I came into fair trade, I was thinking purely, oh, it's about people. And over the years, I've come to realize that you can't think about one and not the other. It really both go hand in hand.
I totally agree, for sure. And so talk about, what is the New York City Fair Trade Coalition really doing? What's their role in all of this?
Yeah, so the New York City Fair Trade Coalition is a member organization. We are a grassroots organization that's truly dedicated to upholding the principles of fair trade. But I would say the unique value that we really provide to our members is education. We believe that it's important for people to not feel that their only tie to fair trade has to be by having a fair trade business. You can be a consumer that is also dedicated to fair trade principles. We believe that it's important to also acknowledge the fact that everyone has a role in how we create and consume products. So the New York City Fair Trade Coalition in particular is really dedicated to fostering relationships between both businesses and advocates, and creating platforms for education and basically cross-information pollination, I suppose.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. You're all about collaboration, which is great, and just educating people, which is so important. I feel like that's the first step to anything. We have to educate ourselves. We have to become aware, and then to decide things, make a different change, you know, go about things a different way that you've been doing for maybe so long.
Yeah,
that's really, really awesome. And you support a lot of businesses too. So talk a little bit maybe about the support that you give businesses that do sign up for your platform as a fair trade business.
Yeah, so for us, it's really critical that we create a community of both businesses and advocates that can collaborate. And so for our businesses, we often do get a lot of opportunities for them to showcase their products, their brand to larger consumer groups. So we decide, for us, the most critical aspect with our businesses is to make sure that they have a platform where they can not only take advantage of great learning opportunities, but also be able to provide to them resources and access to markets and events like Tex World, right? For us, it's being able to share our members with everyone else and be able to show the amazing work that they're doing. For us, it's less about the organization and more about the members and the advocates that we have been so lucky to be working with and collaborating with.
That's so awesome. And I'm sure businesses, especially when they're first starting up, they've got a ton of questions, right? How do I go about starting a fair trade business, and what's going to be required of me, and what is that going to cost, and what is that going to look like? So you're a great resource for that, I'm sure.
Exactly. And so for us, it's really important to be able to really match these businesses up with the resources that they need. So regardless if you're an established fair trade business, where some of our members are people who have been around, or businesses that have been around for many years now. And then we have some members that are just starting. So being able to have that collaborative environment is what we really pride ourselves in creating and fostering more of.
So awesome. Now, I know Fashion Revolution had started the whole Who Made My Clothes movement many, many years ago, and that's still very popular today. How does that kind of build on the principles of fair trade, and how are you guys kind of involved with that as well?
Yeah, so the Fashion Revolution, which started the Who Made My Clothes movement, basically came out of, in 2013, we saw the Rana Plaza collapse that happened of a garment factory in Bangladesh. And so what that basically was the Who Made My Clothes movement basically came out of that. And what it pushes for is more transparency, right? At the end of the day, what we've realized is fast fashion is most notorious for these really these garment factories with really poor working conditions.
Yeah.
And for us, what's really important is making sure that we create and push for a movement where even consumers are being more thoughtful about where are my clothes being made, who's making them, how are they getting paid, is the business that I am shopping from or the brand that I am supporting actually taking care of the people at every level of the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it's not just about taking care of your employees in San Francisco, but it's also about taking care of your employees at every single stage. May it be the cotton pickers who help create the cotton for your t-shirt,
Right.
to the person who takes that thread and makes that t-shirt, right? Like at every level, we want to be thoughtful about how that person is being taken care of. So bringing it back to the Who Made My Clothes campaign, for us, I think as a not just fair trade, but sustainable fashion movement, it's really important that we uphold the principles of transparency. We believe that people should ask, where are my clothes being made? So for us, it's really important that we help support that. And so a huge part of what most fair trade organizations, including New York City Fair Trade Coalition, a huge part of what we do is dedicating ourselves and dedicating our goals to really making sure that people are thinking before they're buying, and also thinking about how to not just demand transparency, but also commit to the longevity of the products that you make, right? So the products that you are buying, you want to make sure that you are maintaining their longevity, because we, in the fast fashion is based on the principle that you buy and toss, right?
Yes.
It's really consumer based. And
Yes.
I would say that that's something that we are really dedicated to in fair trade, is making sure that people realize that it's not just about buying and throwing away clothes. It's about buying thoughtfully, knowing where the product you're buying from is being sourced from, who's making it, and then finally making sure that you're committed to the longevity of that product, because that's how you can truly be not just fair to people, but also to the planet.
Yes, totally. And I know that a lot of people are not aware that fashion is actually the #2, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, polluting industry in our world. And that's really shocking, I think, when you really think about all the other industries that are out there. #2 is really, really shocking. Now, you touched on also another point of all these different organizations. I know there's the WFTO and Fair Trade Federation and all these different organizations. Obviously, the UN has their whole SDG program that they're kind of implementing. Can you talk a little bit about the different organizations and their standards and their principles and how they're kind of what they're doing to help combat fair trade? And
yeah, sure, most definitely. Each of the way. So WFTO stands for World Fair Trade Organization. They are essentially a certifying body, and they work with brands and businesses basically based anywhere in the world, right? And their principles are truly about making sure that they have their own set of standards that they vet businesses by before they can be a WFTO business. Another certifying body that is out there is Fair Trade Certified, and that they have their own set of principles. All of these different organizations have their own principles, but they're all very similar, right? At the end of the day, they're all dedicated to the same mission. It gets gets a little confusing at times for people. And then there's Fair Trade Federation, which is actually not a certifying body. They're a member-based organization, and they're actually a trade organization. So they have their own way of vetting members. Many members of the Fair Trade Federation are WFTO certified.
Okay.
So there is a lot of
Crossover.
that happens between the organizations. But yeah, so each of these are very different. You have Fair Trade Certified, Fair Trade USA, you have WFTO, FTF, and there's a wide range of them, but they all really stem into the same principles about fairness of people on the planet. Just their way of measuring impact can be a little different, or the way that they look at supply chains can be slightly different. And then the final thing is, to your point about the SDGs, the UN's SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are essentially the base principles that really align with fair trade. It's the future for communities everywhere in the world. It's about really focusing on the systemic issues and addressing poverty and many of these hard-hitting issues head on. And so a lot of fair trade organizations really do feed into that mindset as well, and they really speak to that. The SDGs and fair trade principles really do crosstalk quite a bit.
Yes, totally. And anyone that's not familiar with the SDGs, I recommend do some research, do some homework. It's really good to pay attention to what all of these things really are. Now, I would assume if you're going to, let's say, if you're a clothing designer and you want to work with a factory, you should probably look for a factory that's certified with one of these certifications, correct? Just to kind of make sure that they really are fair trade.
Yeah, most definitely. So there's a few different ways that people go about this, right? And two main ways. The first is you go through and you know, like the WFTO introduced a really easy search feature so that you can actually search for organizations or businesses that are, or factories that are fair trade and have gone through their vetting process. So there is a way that you can actually do that and find it. So yes, you can either work with a pre-established cooperative or factory that is already has the label of one of these organizations, or you could go a separate route, which is setting up your own cooperative.
Well, we have two apps.
Much
We have an
more complicated, much harder.
Yes,
But you could go your own route, set up your own cooperative. You just need to make sure that you then are looking at what bodies you might be working with and wanting to get certified through, and then making sure that you're upholding those principles, because all of them will come and they will do a check. They want to see how are you making sure that you are hitting the marks that we want in the way that you've set up your operation. So you could go that route, but it is definitely a more longer and difficult, and it's a process. Yes. Exactly.
Yes, I can imagine. We probably don't recommend that route.
Yeah. It's if you're just starting, it's probably easier to go through one of the pre-existing portals and finding someone to work with through there. There's some great cooperatives that are already certified and established. Or, sometimes there is a community that some entrepreneurs want to work with. And for them, that is the answer, is setting up your own operation. And I know plenty of people who have, and it's a great way if that's the goal that you're trying to accomplish with your business.
Yeah, great. And I know I work with a lot of upcoming designers, and a lot of them want to make in the USA, and I'm a big proponent of made in the USA. But at the end of the day, made in the USA doesn't necessarily mean that it's fair trade. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Manpreet, because I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have.
Yeah, so you can make in the USA, and just because you're making in the USA doesn't necessarily mean that garment workers or the makers are actually being paid a fair wage. We see this in LA a lot. There are many garment factory workers in Los Angeles that are not being paid fair wages. And it's a huge misconception to assume that just because something has a Made in the USA label, that means that it is somehow immune to any sort of exploitation whatsoever.
Yes.
It's kind of this idea that, you know, we're living in a really interesting time right now, this conversation that we're having, right, is this idea that we often think that exploitation is happily false. It's just
Yes.
like human trafficking happens in every zip code, right? That is not something that is purely an issue that happens internationally. It happens here as well. So we need to recognize that just because it's made in the USA does not necessarily mean that it's being ethically made or it's being ethically sourced.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, what is one piece of advice that you want to leave everyone with, those who are thinking of starting and practicing fair trade for their business?
Yeah. So I would say that anything good is not easy, and I think that it's really something that people don't realize is that actually being committed to paying fair wages and actually being committed to really caring for the makers at every level of your supply chain is dedication. It takes commitment, and it's a commitment that I think is really necessary. I personally feel that if you are thinking of starting your own business or want to go into if you're thinking of starting your own business, really be thoughtful about what you're sourcing, where you're sourcing it from, because I'm really hoping that we don't need to have certifying bodies to continue to say that this is fair trade. I think we need to normalize fair trade. And so I really encourage you to help normalize that everyone deserves to be paid fairly and equitably.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. Well, it's been so lovely chatting with you, Manpreet. Thank you so very much for your time. Everyone, please sign up for the Text World virtual event. It's virtual, so you don't have to fly. You can literally be at home in your pajamas, tuning in. There's going to be some great seminars. There's going to be the Resource Row section, which is where New York City Fair Trade Coalition will be. And talk with Manpreet. You can chat, you can have a virtual session with somebody, you can check out all this cool stuff inside their virtual booth. So definitely check it out. Follow New York City Fair Trade Coalition on Instagram, and we'll see you there, everyone.
Yeah, see you there. Schedule some time with us. We'd love to chat with you if you're interested in learning more about fair trade.
Awesome. And tune in 2 weeks. We'll do another one of these IG takeovers with Fashion Mingle. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Take care.
Thank you so much.